Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of ancient Egypt's most terrifying and epic tales. You might think the sun simply rises and sets each day without effort, but the ancient Egyptians knew differently. They understood that every single dawn is a hard-won victory. Tonight, you'll discover the nightly battle that has raged since the beginning of time. You'll learn about Ra, the mighty sun god, and his eternal enemy Apep, the chaos serpent who wants to devour all of creation and plunge the universe into eternal darkness. If you find these ancient cosmic battles relaxing and fascinating, go ahead and hit that like button, and let me know in the comments, would you have the courage to sail with Ra through the dangerous underworld every single night? Now close your eyes and imagine the very beginning of everything. Imagine a time before time existed, a moment before the first moment. Let's travel back to the dawn of creation itself. In the beginning, there was only none. None was the primordial waters. None was chaos and potential mixed together. None was neither light nor dark. None was neither life nor death. None simply was. An endless ocean of possibility stretching in all directions. Nothing existed yet. Nothing had form or substance. Everything waited to be born. From these waters of chaos, the first consciousness emerged. This consciousness called itself Atum. Atum was the first thought in an empty universe. Atum was awareness appearing in the void. Atum existed alone in the infinite waters. There was nothing else. No other gods, no creation, just Atum floating in the primordial ocean. But Atum had a desire. Atum wanted to create. Atum wanted to bring order to chaos. Atum wanted to fill the emptiness with life and light. So Atum began the great work of creation. Through thought and will, Atum brought forth the first gods. Atum created Shu, the god of air. Atum created Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. These two gods were the first emanations from the Creator. They were the first steps away from chaos toward order. Shu and Tefnut together created more gods. They brought forth Geb, the earth god. They created Nut, the sky goddess. Creation was beginning to take shape. But creation required more than just gods. Creation needed light. Creation needed warmth. Creation needed something to give life to all that would come. So from Atum came forth another manifestation. This manifestation was Ra. Ra the sun god. Ra the bringer of light. Ra the sustainer of all life. Ra was magnificent beyond description. His body was made of pure light. His skin glowed like molten gold. His eyes were so bright they could illuminate the darkest corners of existence. When Ra spoke, his voice was like thunder mixed with music. When Ra moved, brilliance followed him. He was power and majesty combined. Ra took his place in the heavens. He became the visible sun that would cross the sky. He brought warmth to the newly formed earth. He brought light that would allow life to flourish. Plants could grow under his rays. Creatures could see and thrive. Ra was the source of everything good and living. Each day, Ra would cross the sky in his Solar Barque. This was a divine boat that sailed through the heavens. The boat was called the manned jet, the boat of millions of years. It was crewed by other gods who helped Ra on his journey. They would sail from east to west. They would bring daylight to the world below. The journey across the sky was glorious and beautiful. But what happened at night? Where did Ra go when the sun set? This is where the story becomes dark and dangerous. This is where the eternal battle begins. Because when Ra descended below the western horizon, he entered a realm of shadows and terror. He entered the Duat, the underworld. The Duat was not like the world above. The Duat was a place of darkness and danger. It was a realm where the dead dwelt. It was a place where demons lurked. It was a twisted mirror of the living world, and traveling through the Duat was perilous beyond imagination. Ra had to make this journey every single night. There was no other way. To rise again in the east, he had to travel through the underworld. He had to pass through 12 hours of darkness. He had to navigate treacherous waters and face terrible monsters. And worst of all, he had to confront his greatest enemy. This enemy had existed since the beginning. This enemy was born from the same primordial chaos that birthed creation. But while Ra represented order and light, this enemy represented chaos and darkness. While Ra brought life, this enemy brought destruction. This enemy was called Apep, and Apep wanted nothing less than to destroy Ra and end creation itself. Apep was not a god. Apep was something else entirely. Apep was chaos given form. Apep was the darkness that existed before light. Apep was destruction personified. Some said Apep had always existed in the waters of none. Some said Apep was the living embodiment of everything the creator gods had rejected when they made the ordered universe. Apep's form was terrible to behold. Apep was a serpent, but not an ordinary serpent. Apep was massive beyond comprehension. Some said Apep was 50 feet long. Others said Apep stretched for miles. His body was as thick as the trunk of the largest tree. His scales were black as the deepest darkness. His eyes glowed with malevolent red light. Apep's mouth could swallow the sun whole. His fangs dripped with venom that could dissolve divine flesh. His coils could crush mountains. His very presence caused reality to weaken and fray. Where Apep went, chaos followed. Order broke down. Light dimmed. Life withered. But Apep's greatest weapon was not physical. Apep's greatest weapon was his roar. When Apep roared, the sound was so terrible it could stop the Solar Barque in its tracks. It could freeze the gods with terror. It could create storms and earthquakes. Apep's roar was the sound of chaos trying to unmake creation. Every single night, Apep waited for Ra. Every single night, Apep prepared to attack. Apep's goal never changed. Apep wanted to devour Ra. Apep wanted to swallow the sun. Apep wanted to plunge the world into eternal darkness. And if Apep succeeded, all of creation would unravel. The universe would return to the chaos of none. Everything would end. This was the battle that began at the dawn of time. This was the struggle that continued every single night. Ra had to survive. Ra had to defeat Apep. Ra had to complete his journey through the Duat. Because if Ra failed even once, there would be no dawn. There would be no tomorrow. There would be nothing but endless darkness and chaos. The stakes could not be higher. The battle could not be more important, and it was a battle that would never truly end, because chaos cannot be permanently destroyed. Apep could be defeated, but Apep would always return. Night after night, for all eternity. The struggle between Ra and Apep was destined to continue as long as creation existed. Ra's journey through the sky during the day was magnificent. The sun god sat in his golden throne aboard the Manjet. The boat gleamed with divine light. It sailed smoothly across the blue expanse of heaven. The gods who crewed the boat sang hymns of praise. The world below basked in warmth and light. Everything was perfect and ordered during these daylight hours. But as the day progressed, Ra grew older. This was one of the great mysteries of the sun god. Ra was not always the same age. Ra changed throughout the day. In the morning, when he rose in the east, Ra was Khepri. Khepri was Ra as a young man. Khepri had the head of a scarab beetle. He was full of energy and vitality. He was the morning sun, fresh and new. At noon, when the sun reached its highest point, Ra was in his prime. This was Ra in his full glory. This was Ra at his most powerful. His light was strongest. His heat was most intense. He appeared as a man with the head of a falcon. A sun disk sat atop his head. He was majestic and terrible in his power. But as afternoon turned to evening, Ra began to age. He became Atum once more, the same Atum who created the world, but now old and tired. His light grew softer, his warmth decreased. By the time the sun touched the western horizon, Ra was an elderly god. He was weary from his day's journey. He needed rest. He needed to pass through the night to be reborn again. At sunset, Ra's boat changed. The Manjet transformed into the Mesektet. This was the night barque. This was the vessel that would carry Ra through the underworld. The Mesectet was different from the dayboat. It was darker, it was more fortified, it was built to withstand the dangers that lurked in the Duat. The crew of the night barque was carefully chosen. These were the gods who would protect Ra during his perilous journey. Each god had a specific role. Each god brought particular powers. Together they formed Ra's defense against the forces of chaos. The most important crew member was Set. Yes, the same Set who murdered Osiris, Set the god of chaos and the desert, Set the red god of violence. You might wonder why Set was allowed on Ra's boat. Why would the other gods trust him? The answer is simple. Set's chaotic nature made him the perfect weapon against Apep. Set stood at the prow of the boat. He held a spear in his powerful hands. Set was not afraid of chaos. Set was chaos himself. He could face Apep without fear. He could fight the serpent with savage fury. Only Set had the strength and the will to stand against the embodiment of destruction. Another important crew member was Maat. Maat was the goddess of truth, justice, and order. She appeared as a woman with an ostrich feather on her head. Maat represented everything Apep opposed. Where Apep was chaos, Maat was order. Where Apep was lies, Maat was truth. Her presence on the boat helped maintain reality itself during the dangerous journey. Hu sailed with Ra as well. Hu was the god of authoritative speech. His words had power. His commands could not be ignored. When Hu spoke, even demons had to listen. His voice helped counter Apep's terrible roar. His words helped maintain order when chaos threatened to overwhelm them. Sia also crewed the boat. Sia was the god of perception and insight. Sia could see through illusions. Sia could detect dangers before they appeared. In the darkness of the Duat, where vision was limited, Sia's perception was invaluable. He could warn Ra of approaching threats. He could guide the boat through treacherous passages. Heka joined the crew as well. Heka was the god of magic. Magic was essential in the underworld. The laws of nature worked differently in the Duat. Only magic could counter some of the dangers they faced. Heka's spells protected the boat. His incantations repelled demons. His magic helped Ra maintain his divine power even in the realm of death. Other gods joined the crew on different nights. Thoth, the wise, sometimes sailed with them. Thoth was the god of knowledge and writing. His wisdom helped solve the riddles and challenges of the underworld. Neith, the warrior goddess, occasionally came. Her arrows could strike down demons before they reached the boat. Serke, the scorpion goddess, lent her protective powers. But even with all these divine defenders, the journey was dangerous. The Duat was filled with horrors. There were demons who attacked anyone passing through. There were lakes of fire that could burn even divine flesh. There were regions of absolute darkness where even Ra's light could barely penetrate. There were gates guarded by terrible beings who challenged all who sought passage. Ra's boat had to pass through 12 hours of night. Each hour was a separate region of the underworld. Each hour had its own challenges. Each hour brought different dangers. The boat sailed on the waters of the underworld. These waters were not like the Nile. These waters were thick and dark. They moved sluggishly. Strange creatures swam beneath the surface. In the first hour, the boat entered the Duat through the western gate. The sun's light dimmed as they crossed the threshold. The crew prepared their weapons. They readied their spells. They knew what was coming. They had made this journey countless times before. But familiarity did not make it easier. Danger was always present. Death was always possible. The souls of the dead watched the boat pass. They lined the shores of the underworld river. They called out to Ra. They begged for his light. They pleaded for his blessing. Ra would shine upon the blessed dead as he passed. He would illuminate the fields where righteous souls dwelt. He would bring them comfort in their eternal rest. But not all souls were blessed. Some souls were being punished. Some souls had failed Osiris's judgment. They suffered in pits of fire. They endured endless torment. They screamed as Ra's boat sailed past. Their cries echoed through the darkness. It was a terrible sound. It reminded the gods of what happened when chaos and evil prevailed. The boat sailed deeper into the Duat. The darkness grew thicker. The air grew colder despite Ra's presence. Strange sounds echoed from the shadows, splashing in the water, whispers in unknown languages, the scraping of claws on stone. The crew remained alert. They watched all directions. They knew Apep could attack at any moment. Sometimes Apep struck early in the night. Sometimes the serpent waited until the darkest hours. There was no pattern. There was no way to predict when the attack would come. This unpredictability was part of Apep's strategy. It kept the gods on edge. It prevented them from ever relaxing their guard. The boat sailed through the second hour of night. The waters grew darker still. The shores of the underworld faded from view. Only the glow from Ra's divine form provided any light. Even that light seemed weaker here. The Duat itself seemed to drain the radiance from the sun god. This was the nature of the underworld. This was the realm where light struggled to exist. Set stood at the front of the boat. His red eyes scanned the darkness. His muscles were tense. His grip on his spear was tight. Set could feel something. His chaotic nature sensed a kindred presence. Chaos recognized chaos. Apep was near. The water ahead of the boat began to ripple. Something massive moved beneath the surface. The ripples grew into waves. The waves rocked the boat. The crew braced themselves. They knew what these signs meant. Apep was approaching. The serpent was preparing to strike. Suddenly, the water exploded. A massive coil broke the surface. It was black as midnight. It was covered in scales the size of shields. This coil rose high into the air. It towered above the boat. Water cascaded off it like waterfalls. The sight was terrifying, even to the gods. More coils emerged. They surrounded the boat on all sides. Apep was enormous. The serpent's body seemed endless. Coil after coil appeared from the dark waters. They created a wall of serpent flesh around Ra's vessel. The boat was trapped. There was nowhere to sail. They were caught in Apep's coils. Then Apep's head rose from the water. The head was monstrous. It was larger than Ra's entire boat. The jaws could easily swallow the vessel whole. The serpent's eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. These were not the eyes of a mindless beast. Apep was cunning. Apep was calculating. Apep knew exactly what he was doing. Apep's mouth opened. Rows of fangs were revealed. Each fang was as long as a man's arm. They dripped with black venom. The venom hissed where it hit the water. It dissolved everything it touched. Even divine flesh would melt under that poison. Even gods could die from Apep's bite. But worse than the fangs was the smell. Apep's breath was the stench of decay and corruption. It was the smell of everything rotting. It was the odor of chaos and dissolution. The gods on the boat recoiled from it. Even Set, who feared nothing, turned his face away. Apep did not attack immediately. The serpent enjoyed this moment. Apep loved the fear he caused. The serpent drew out the anticipation. Apep wanted the gods to feel helpless. Apep wanted them to understand their doom was inevitable. Then Apep spoke. The serpent's voice was terrible. It was like rocks grinding together. It was like metal scraping on metal. It was a sound that hurt to hear. Apep's words were in the language of chaos. They were almost impossible to understand. But the meaning was clear enough. Apep was declaring his victory. Apep was promising Ra's destruction. Ra stood from his throne. The elderly god was tired from his day's journey. But he was not afraid. Ra had faced Apep countless times. Ra knew this battle. Ra understood what was at stake. He spoke back to the serpent. His voice was weak compared to the roar of Apep, but his words carried authority. Ra reminded Apep that chaos had never won. Ra declared that order would prevail once more. Apep laughed. The sound was horrible. It echoed across the underworld. It caused the dead to cower in their tombs. It made demons flee to the deepest pits. Apep's laugh was the sound of mockery and hatred. The serpent did not believe Ra could win. Not this time, not when the sun god was so old and weak. Set had heard enough. The red god shouted a challenge to Apep. Set raised his spear. He hurled insults at the serpent. He called Apep a coward and a failure. Set knew how to provoke an enemy. Set knew how to turn Apep's attention away from Ra, and it worked. Apep's glowing eyes fixed on Set, the serpent's hatred focused on the red god. Apep struck. The massive head lunged forward, the jaws opened wide, the serpent moved with impossible speed for something so large. Apep aimed directly at Set. The serpent wanted to swallow the red god whole. Apep wanted to eliminate his most dangerous opponent first. But Set was ready. Set leaped forward to meet the attack. This seemed like madness. Set appeared to be jumping into Apep's mouth. The other gods cried out in alarm. But Set knew what he was doing. At the last moment, Set thrust his spear upward. The spear struck the roof of Apep's mouth. The divine weapon pierced through the serpent's flesh. Apep roared in pain. The sound was deafening. It shook the underworld. The waters thrashed. The boat rocked violently. The gods had to hold on to avoid being thrown overboard. Set's spear had drawn first blood. The red god had wounded the chaos serpent. But the wound only made Apep more furious. The serpent pulled back. The spear was torn from Set's hands. It remained stuck in Apep's mouth. Black blood poured from the wound. But Apep did not retreat. Instead, the serpent attacked again, this time with even more rage, this time with deadly intent. Apep's coils tightened around the boat. The serpent was trying to crush the vessel. The wood began to creak. The divine boat was strong, but even it had limits. If Apep crushed the boat, the gods would be thrown into the dark waters. They would be vulnerable. They would be easy prey for the demons and monsters that lurked below. Heka stepped forward. The god of magic began to chant. His voice rose in a spell of protection. Blue light emanated from his hands. The light formed a barrier around the boat. Heka's magic reinforced the vessel. The wood stopped creaking. The boat held firm against Apep's crushing coils. Apep realized the physical attack was not working. The serpent changed tactics. Apep opened his mouth again, but this time Apep did not try to bite. Instead, Apep roared. This was the chaos roar. This was Apep's most terrible weapon. The sound was beyond description. It was not just loud, it was wrong. It was a sound that should not exist. It was chaos made audible. The roar hit the boat like a physical force. The gods were thrown backward. Even mighty Set was knocked down. The boat stopped moving. The roar had frozen everything. Time itself seemed to stop. Reality wavered. The ordered universe trembled. For a moment, it seemed like Apep would succeed. For a moment, chaos seemed to be winning. Ra felt his light dimming. The roar was draining his power. The sun god was fading. His divine essence was weakening. If this continued, Ra would go out like a candle. The sun would be extinguished. Darkness would cover everything. But then Maat acted. The goddess of order stepped beside Ra. She placed her hand on his shoulder. Her presence reminded him of truth and justice. Her touch reminded him why he fought. Maat spoke words of order. Her voice was calm and clear. Her words countered Apep's chaos roar. The balance shifted. Ra's light steadied. The sun god drew strength from Maat's presence. Order pushed back against chaos. Ra stood tall again. He raised his hands. Light blazed forth from his palms. The light struck Apep directly. The serpent recoiled from the radiance. Set recovered from the roar. He grabbed a new weapon. The red god picked up a massive harpoon kept on the boat. This harpoon was made for hunting the chaos serpent. Its point was blessed with spells. Its shaft was reinforced with magic. Set hefted the weapon. He aimed carefully, and he threw with all his divine strength. The harpoon flew true. It struck Apep in the side. It pierced deep into the serpent's flesh. More black blood poured out. Apep screamed in pain. The chaos roar turned into a shriek of agony. The serpent's coils loosened. The boat was freed from the crushing grip. Apep thrashed in the water. The serpent's massive body writhed in pain. Waves crashed against the boat from all directions. The crew held on desperately. They could not afford to fall into these dark waters. Below the surface lurked creatures that would tear apart even gods. The underworld waters were deadly to anyone who entered them unprepared. Set grabbed another harpoon. He did not give Apep time to recover. The red god threw the second weapon with perfect accuracy. It struck Apep near the first harpoon. The two weapons drove deep into the serpent's flesh. They created terrible wounds that would not heal quickly. Even chaos incarnate could be hurt by divine weapons. The other gods joined the attack. Hu spoke words of power. His authoritative voice commanded Apep to retreat. The words carried magical force. They compelled obedience. Even Apep, who represented disorder, was affected by Hu's commands. The serpent's movements became slower, the chaos being struggled against the authority in Hu's voice. Sia pointed out vulnerable spots on Apep's body. His divine perception could see weaknesses invisible to others. He called out directions to Set. He told the red god where to aim. His guidance made Set's attacks more effective. Each weapon struck a critical point. Each blow caused maximum damage. Heka wove spells of binding. Magical chains appeared in the air. They wrapped around Apep's coils. The chains glowed with blue fire. They burned the serpent's dark scales. They restricted Apep's movements. The chaos serpent was being bound by order itself. Magic was imposing structure on chaos. Ra stood at the center of the boat. The sun god gathered his remaining strength. He knew he had to end this battle quickly. His aged form could not sustain a prolonged fight. He needed to drive Apep away so the journey could continue. Ra raised both hands above his head. He began to glow brighter and brighter. The light from Ra intensified. It pushed back the darkness. It illuminated the underworld waters. For a moment, it was as if the sun had risen in the land of the dead. The light was painful to creatures of chaos. It burned away shadows. It revealed truth. It imposed order on the disordered realm. Apep shrieked. The serpent could not bear Ra's full radiance. The light burned worse than any weapon. It seared Apep's very essence. The chaos serpent tried to shield itself with its coils, but the light penetrated everywhere. There was no escape from Ra's illumination. The serpent began to retreat. Apep's coils unwound from around the boat. The massive body started sinking back into the dark waters. But Apep did not flee completely. The serpent did not disappear. Instead, Apep moved backwards slowly. The glowing red eyes never left Ra. The serpent's hatred never diminished. Apep was retreating, but not surrendering. As the serpent withdrew, Apep spoke again. The grinding voice issued a promise. Apep swore this was not over. Apep vowed to return. The serpent declared that one night Ra would fail. One night the sun would not rise. One night chaos would triumph. The words were a curse and a prophecy combined. Then Apep sank beneath the surface. The last coil disappeared into the black water. Ripples spread outward and then faded. The water became still once more. The immediate danger had passed. The battle was over. For now. The gods on the boat relaxed slightly, but they did not let down their guard completely. They knew Apep could attack again. The serpent might strike later in the same night, or Apep might wait for another night. There was no way to know. Vigilance was always necessary. Set retrieved his harpoons. The weapons floated to the surface after Apep released them. The red god pulled them from the water. He examined them carefully. Both were damaged. Apep's blood had corroded the metal. The chaos serpent's essence corrupted everything it touched. Set would need new weapons before the next battle. Ra dimmed his light. The effort of that brilliant radiance had exhausted him further. The sun god sat back on his throne. He looked even older than before. The battle had drained him significantly. His skin was more wrinkled. His movements were slower. He needed rest. But rest would not come until the journey was complete. Maat stood beside Ra. She spoke words of encouragement. She reminded him of his purpose. She told him that order must prevail. Her presence gave Ra strength. Her embodiment of truth and justice reminded him why he endured this nightly ordeal. The universe needed Ra. All living things depended on his return each morning. The boat began moving again. The crew took up their positions. They would continue through the remaining hours of night. They would pass through more regions of the Duat. They would face more challenges. But the worst was behind them. Apep had been defeated once more. The sun would rise again. The souls of the blessed dead cheered as the boat passed. They had witnessed the battle. They had seen Ra triumph over chaos. Their cheers echoed across the underworld. They sang praises to the sun god. They honored Set for his bravery. They blessed all the gods who protected the light. But in the regions where the wicked were punished, there were groans of disappointment. The evil dead had hoped Apep would win. They had wanted chaos to triumph. They desired the end of order and justice. Their punishment might end if the universe dissolved, but once again their hopes were crushed. Once again order prevailed. The boat sailed into the third hour of night. The waters here were calmer. The dangers here were less severe. This was a time of relative peace. The gods used this time to recover. They tended their wounds. They repaired damage to the boat. They prepared for whatever challenges remained ahead. Set stood watch at the prow. His red eyes never stopped scanning the darkness. He would not be caught by surprise again. He was ready for Apep if the serpent returned. But Set suspected the chaos being would not attack again this night. Apep's wounds were too severe. The serpent needed time to recover just as the gods did. The battle between Ra and Apep had been fought countless times. Every night since creation began they had clashed. Every night Ra had emerged victorious. Every night the sun had risen again in the east. But it was never easy. It was never assured. Each battle could potentially be the last. The ancient Egyptians understood this. They knew the sun's daily appearance was not guaranteed. They knew Ra fought for them every night. They knew Set, despite his evil reputation, protected the light. So the Egyptians helped Ra in their own way. They performed rituals during the night. They spoke prayers. They cast spells to strengthen the sun god. In temples across Egypt, priests conducted ceremonies throughout the night. They recited texts from the Book of Gates and the Book of Caverns. These sacred books described Ra's journey through the Duat. They contained spells to help the sun god. The priests would chant these spells. They would make offerings. They would symbolically battle Apep themselves. The common people helped too. They stayed awake during the darkest hours. They lit lamps to keep darkness at bay. They told stories of Ra's victories. They taught their children about the eternal battle. Everyone in Egypt understood they had a role in helping the sun rise. The boat continued its voyage through the underworld. Each hour brought new wonders and new terrors. The fourth hour was the region of the Sokar. This was a mysterious place. The passage here was difficult. The waters became thick like sand. The boat could barely move through them. In this hour, Ra's boat had to transform. It could no longer sail on water that was not truly water. Instead, the boat was pulled by supernatural beings. These were divine serpents, but not like Apep. These serpents served Ra. They were creatures of order. They pulled the boat through the thick substance that filled this region. Strange statues lined the shores. They depicted gods in unusual forms. Some had multiple heads, some had bodies that defied description. These were aspects of the divine that humans rarely saw. These were the secret forms of the gods. They existed here in the fourth hour where reality was fluid and strange. Ra passed through this region in silence. Even the gods on the boat spoke little here. This place demanded reverence. This place was sacred in ways different from other parts of the Duat. The mysteries here were profound. The truths here were hidden even from most divine beings. The fifth hour brought them to the hall of Osiris. Here, the green god sat on his throne. Osiris judged the dead in this region. The souls who had passed his judgment dwelt in paradise nearby. The fields of reeds stretched as far as the eye could see. These fields were perfect replicas of Egypt. The blessed dead farmed there just as they had in life. But here, the crops never failed. Here, there was no pain or sorrow. Ra's boat stopped briefly in this hour. The sun god and Osiris spoke together. They discussed the balance between life and death. They shared knowledge about the souls passing between worlds. This meeting happened every night. It was a reminder that life and death were partners. They were two aspects of the same eternal cycle. Osiris blessed Ra's journey. The green god gave the sun god renewed strength. Osiris's power over death helped protect Ra from the dangers still ahead. In return, Ra's light brought comfort to the dead. The sun god's radiance reminded them of the life they once knew. This exchange of blessings helped maintain the cosmic order. The boat moved into the 6th hour. This was the deepest part of the night. This was the darkest hour. Ra was at his weakest here. The sun god's light was barely a flicker. He looked ancient beyond measure. His skin was wrinkled like old papyrus. His eyes were dim. He seemed more dead than alive. This hour was called the Hour of Transformation. Here, in the deepest darkness, Ra had to die completely. He had to let go of his old form. He had to embrace death fully. Only through death could he be reborn. Only by accepting the end could he begin again. Ra lay down in his boat. He closed his eyes. His light went out completely. For a few moments there was total darkness. The crew could see nothing. They could only feel the boat moving forward through the void. It was terrifying even for the gods. This moment of complete darkness felt like the end of everything. But this death was necessary. This was the deepest magic of the universe. Life came from death. Dawn came from night. Order emerged from chaos. Ra had to experience the fullness of death to be renewed. He had to touch the void to return with new life. In this darkness, something miraculous happened. Ra's body began to change. The old, withered form started to transform. New flesh grew. New strength returned. The transformation was not visible in the darkness, but it was happening. Ra was being reborn. When Ra opened his eyes again, they glowed with new light. The light was different from before. It was no longer the light of an old god clinging to existence. It was the light of youth returning. Ra was becoming Khepri again, the scarab beetle god, the morning sun, the bringer of dawn. The boat entered the 7th hour. Ra sat up on his throne. He was still transforming. He was no longer old, but not yet young. He was in transition. His light grew steadily brighter. The crew could see again. Hope returned to their hearts. The worst was behind them. They were moving toward morning. In the 7th hour, they encountered the demons who guarded the gates. These demons were not evil like Apep. They served a purpose. They challenged all who passed. They tested whether travelers had the right to continue. Even Ra had to prove himself to these guardians. Each demon asked a riddle. Each demon demanded a password. Ra knew all the answers. He had made this journey every night since creation. He knew every challenge. He spoke the secret names. He answered the riddles correctly. The demons bowed and allowed the boat to pass. But the challenges were still dangerous. If Ra ever forgot a password, the demon would attack. If he ever answered incorrectly, the gate would not open. The boat would be trapped. So even though Ra knew the answers, he had to remain focused. He could not let his transformation distract him from these tests. The 8th hour brought them to regions of fire. Lakes of flame burned on both sides of the river. The heat was intense even for divine beings. Demons of flame danced on the shores. They wielded whips of fire. They challenged the boat. They threatened to capsize it into the burning lakes. But Ra's growing light pushed back the flames. His radiance was becoming solar fire itself. His heat matched and exceeded the underworld flames. The fire demons recognized their master. They bowed before Ra's power. They allowed the boat to pass unmolested through their territory. The 9th hour was a place of serpents. But again, these were not like Apep. These were protective serpents. They guarded treasures and secrets. They coiled around pillars of lapis lazuli. They watched the boat pass with wise eyes. Some of these serpents were ancient beyond reckoning. They had existed since before creation took its current form. Ra greeted these serpents with respect. He acknowledged their wisdom. He thanked them for their eternal vigilance. The serpents hissed in response. Their hissing sounded like blessings. They approved of Ra's journey. They supported his return to the world above. The 10th hour brought them to the region of preparation. Here, Ra completed his transformation. The change from old Atum to young Khepri was finished. Ra now appeared as a vital young god. His skin glowed with health. His eyes blazed with energy. The scarab beetle appeared on his crown. He was ready to be born again into the world of the living. The crew of the boat sang hymns of celebration. They had survived another night. They had protected Ra through his death and rebirth. They had defeated Apep once more. Now they approached the final hours. Now they moved toward the dawn. The 11th hour arrived. The boat entered the penultimate stage of its journey. Ra could feel the pull of the eastern horizon. He could sense the world of the living drawing near. His light grew stronger with each moment. The darkness of the Duat was losing its grip on him. The sun god was almost free. But this hour held its own dangers. The demons here were desperate. They knew Ra was escaping their realm. They knew the light was returning to the world. Some demons hated the light. They preferred eternal darkness. They made final attempts to stop the boat. They threw themselves at the vessel. They clawed at the hull. They tried to drag it backward. Set moved around the boat with his weapons. He struck down any demon that came too close. His spear pierced their shadowy forms. His strength threw them back into the depths. Set was in his element here. Fighting gave him purpose. Protecting Ra gave meaning to his chaotic nature. The other gods helped defend the boat as well. Hu shouted commands that paralyzed the attacking demons. Sia pointed out enemies hiding in the shadows. Heka cast spells that created barriers of light. Maat's presence weakened the demons simply by being near them. Order itself was anathema to these creatures of chaos. The 11th hour was also the time of the final judgment. Souls who had died during the previous day were being weighed in Osiris's hall. Their hearts were placed on scales opposite the feather of Maat. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul could enter paradise. If the heart was heavier, weighed down by sin and evil, the soul was devoured by Amit, the soul eater. Ra's boat passed near this hall of judgment. The sun god watched the proceedings. He bore witness to justice being served. This was important. This reminded Ra why his nightly journey mattered. He fought Apep not just to return to the sky. He fought to maintain the order that allowed justice to exist. Without Ra's light, without his daily victory, there could be no judgment. There could be no reward for the righteous or punishment for the wicked. As the boat moved through the 11th hour, the crew prepared for the final transition. They readied themselves for emergence into the world of the living. They checked their weapons one last time. They spoke prayers of thanksgiving. They had survived another night. They had completed another journey. But they knew they would have to do it all again the next night, and the night after that, forever. The 12th hour began. This was the hour of emergence. This was the moment of birth. The darkness was almost complete, vanquished. The light was almost fully returned. Ra stood at the prow of his boat now. He faced east. He looked toward the horizon he could not yet see but knew was there. The waters of the Duat changed in this final hour. They became lighter. They flowed faster. They carried the boat forward with increasing speed. The boat was being pushed toward the eastern gate. The boundary between the underworld and the living world was approaching rapidly. Strange sounds filled the air. They were not threatening. They were welcoming. These were the sounds of the world waking up. Birds preparing to sing, wind beginning to blow, the rustle of leaves, the lap of waves on the shore. The world of the living was calling Ra back. Nature itself was helping pull him toward the dawn. The eastern gate appeared ahead. It was massive. It was made of some material that existed between substance and light. The gate glowed with a soft radiance. 2 giant serpents guarded this gate. But these serpents were benevolent. They served Ra. Their names were Wadjet and Nekbet. They were the protectors of Egypt itself. The serpent goddesses recognized Ra's boat. They had been waiting for his arrival. They always waited. They would wait for all eternity if necessary. Their purpose was to ensure Ra's safe passage from death to life. They would never fail in this duty. Wadjet and Nekbet opened the gates. The massive doors swung wide. Beyond them was not the darkness of the Duat. Beyond them was the first light of pre-dawn. The sky was no longer black. It was deep blue. Stars still shone but were beginning to fade. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the sun. Ra's boat passed through the gates. The moment it crossed the threshold, everything changed. The underworld was behind them. The land of the living was ahead. The air was fresh. The water was clear. The oppressive weight of the Duat lifted from their shoulders. The gods breathed deeply. They were home. But the journey was not quite complete. Ra still had to rise into the sky. He had to climb from the horizon to his proper place in the heavens. This final ascent was the moment the world waited for. This was the dawn itself. Ra transformed one last time. The youthful Khepri took his final form. The scarab beetle god was at the peak of his power. His light blazed forth. It pushed away the last shadows of night. It announced to all creation that order had triumphed once more. Chaos had been defeated. The sun had returned. Ra's boat lifted from the water. It began to rise into the sky. Higher and higher it climbed. The first rays of sunlight touched the highest mountains. Then they spread across the land. Valley after valley was illuminated. The Nile sparkled with reflected light. The temples of Egypt caught the first rays on their golden peaks. The people of Egypt woke to see the sunrise. They emerged from their homes. They lifted their hands to the sky. They spoke prayers of thanksgiving. They praised Ra for his victory. They honored Set for his protection. They blessed all the gods who had defended the light through another night. The priests in the temples performed the morning rituals. They made offerings to Ra. They burned incense that rose with the morning air. They sang hymns that had been sung for thousands of years. They rang bells and beat drums. The celebrations of dawn echoed across Egypt. In homes throughout the land, families gathered. Parents told their children the story of Ra's nightly battle. They explained about Apep. They taught the young ones that the sunrise was never guaranteed. It had to be fought for. It had to be earned. And everyone had a part to play in helping Ra succeed. Farmers went to their fields with gratitude. The sun would shine on their crops today. The plants would grow. Food would be produced. Life would continue. All because Ra had defeated Apep once more. The farmers worked harder, knowing their efforts were blessed by the sun god's victory. Fishermen pushed their boats into the Nile. They cast their nets with hope. The fish would be plentiful today. The river was alive with Ra's returned light. The fishermen sang songs as they worked. Their songs thanked Ra. Their songs told of the eternal battle. Their songs promised to help again when night returned. Ra climbed higher into the morning sky. His boat sailed smoothly through the clear air. The crew relaxed now. The danger was past. The journey through the Duat was complete. Now came the easier part. The daylight voyage across the heavens. This was Ra's time of glory. This was when he ruled supreme. The morning sun brought warmth to the land. The cold of night faded away. Dew sparkled on plants like tiny diamonds. The world came alive under Ra's rays. Animals emerged from their shelters. Birds sang their morning songs. Life stirred everywhere the light touched. This was the gift Ra brought. This was the blessing of his victory over chaos. As Ra moved across the sky, he transformed again. The young Khepri gradually became Ra in his prime. The scarab aspects faded. The falcon-headed god emerged. This was Ra at noon. This was Ra at his most powerful. His light was brightest. His heat was strongest. He sat on his throne with absolute authority. He was the undisputed ruler of the visible world. Below, Egypt flourished under his gaze. The Nile reflected his light like a ribbon of silver. The desert sands glowed golden under his rays. The cities bustled with activity. Markets filled with merchants. Temples filled with worshippers. Fields filled with workers. All of this was possible because Ra had won his nightly battle. All of this existed because chaos had been defeated once more. But while Ra ruled the day, what happened to Apep? Where did the chaos serpent go after his defeat? The answer was both terrible and inevitable. Apep retreated to the deepest, darkest parts of the Duat. The serpent went to places where even other denizens of the underworld feared to venture. There, in absolute darkness, Apep began to heal. The wounds Set had inflicted were severe. The harpoons had torn great holes in Apep's flesh. Ra's light had burned the serpent's essence. The magical chains had scarred Apep's coils. Any mortal creature would have died from such injuries. Even most gods would have taken years to recover. But Apep was not mortal. Apep was not even truly a god. Apep was chaos itself, and chaos could not be permanently destroyed. Apep's body began to regenerate. The wounds closed slowly. New scales grew over the burned areas. The tears in the flesh knitted themselves back together. Chaos had the power to unmake things. But it also had the power to remake itself. Apep drew on the primordial energies of none. The serpent pulled strength from the same source that had birthed creation. Those infinite waters of potential chaos could restore anything that came from them. As Apep healed, the serpent's hatred grew. Each recovery session was accompanied by vows of vengeance. Apep swore to destroy Ra. The serpent promised that one night the victory would be different. One night the sun would not rise. One night chaos would triumph and order would fall. These vows echoed through the deepest pits of the Duat. They made the darkness even darker. Other creatures of chaos gathered around Apep. Lesser demons and evil spirits came to pay homage. They brought offerings to the great serpent. They spoke words of encouragement. They shared Apep's hatred of Ra. They promised to help in the next attack. An army of chaos surrounded the recovering serpent. But Apep did not want help. The chaos serpent was too proud to accept assistance from lesser beings. Apep believed in his own power absolutely. The serpent was convinced that defeat came only from bad luck or temporary weakness. Next time would be different. Next time Apep would be stronger. Next time the serpent would be ready for Set's attacks. Next time Ra would fall. This pattern had repeated since the beginning of time. Every night Apep attacked. Every night Ra and his crew defended against the Chaos Serpent. Every night Apep was defeated. And every day Apep healed and prepared to attack again. It was an eternal cycle. It would never end as long as creation existed. Some might wonder why Ra did not destroy Apep completely. Why did the sun god allow his enemy to survive and recover? The answer lay in the nature of existence itself. Apep represented chaos. Chaos was the opposite of order, but the universe needed both. Complete order without any chaos would be stagnant. It would be unchanging and dead. Chaos provided the potential for change. It provided the possibility of new things emerging. Ra understood this balance. The sun god knew that Apep served a purpose. The chaos serpent tested order. It challenged creation. It forced the gods to remain vigilant. It ensured that order had to be actively maintained. Without Apep, the gods might become complacent. Without the nightly battle, they might forget their duties. The struggle against chaos gave meaning to order. But this did not mean Apep was welcome. It did not mean the serpent's attacks were acceptable. Apep had to be defeated every night. Chaos had to be controlled and contained. The balance required that chaos exist but not triumph. Order had to win each battle even though the war could never end. As the day progressed, Ra aged again. This was the natural cycle. The sun moved from east to west across the sky. Ra transformed from young Khepri to prime Ra to elderly Atum. By afternoon, the sun god was middle-aged. By evening, he was old once more. The cycle of youth, maturity, and age played out every single day. The people of Egypt tracked Ra's journey. They marked time by the sun's position. Morning was the time of Khepri. Noon was the hour of Ra. Evening belonged to Atum. The entire culture organized itself around the sun god's daily cycle. Time itself was defined by Ra's movement across the sky. As evening approached, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The people knew what was coming. They knew that soon Ra would descend below the western horizon. They knew the sun god would enter the Duat once more. They knew the nightly battle would begin again. and they prepared to help in whatever small ways they could. Priests in the temples began the evening rituals. They spoke prayers for Ra's protection. They called upon Set to defend the sun god. They invoked the other members of the divine crew. They recited spells from the sacred books. These rituals had been performed every evening for thousands of years. They would continue for thousands more. In homes throughout Egypt, families gathered as the sun began to set. Parents told their children to be brave. The darkness was coming, but it was necessary. Ra had to journey through the night to be reborn in the morning. The family would stay awake for a while. They would keep lamps burning. They would symbolically hold back the darkness until sleep claimed them. The sun touched the western horizon. Ra's boat began its descent once more. The sky turned brilliant colors. Orange and red and purple painted the heavens. This was the blood of the coming battle. This was the promise of another struggle between light and darkness. The beautiful sunset was also a warning. It announced that Ra was entering the realm of danger once more. As the last sliver of sun disappeared, the transformation completed. The Manjet became the Mesektet again. The day crew was replaced by the night crew. Set took his position at the prow with renewed determination. The other gods prepared their weapons and spells. They had rested during the day. They were ready for another night of vigilance and combat. Ra entered the western gate of the Duat. The familiar darkness surrounded him. The oppressive atmosphere of the underworld pressed down on the boat. The journey began again. The cycle continued. This night would be like the countless nights before it, and it would be followed by countless nights after it. This was the eternal pattern. This was the way things had always been and always would be. Somewhere in the depths ahead, Apep waited. The chaos serpent had healed from yesterday's wounds. Apep was ready to attack again. The serpent's hatred had not diminished. The serpent's determination had not wavered. Tonight, Apep believed, would be the night of victory. Tonight, the sun would be devoured. Tonight, chaos would win. But Apep was wrong. Apep had been wrong every night for eternity. The serpent would be wrong tonight, and the serpent would be wrong tomorrow night. Because Ra was not alone. Ra had his faithful crew. Ra had the support of all the gods. Ra had the prayers of humanity. Most importantly, Ra had purpose. The sun god fought not for himself but for all creation. This made him stronger than chaos could ever be. The ancient Egyptians understood the profound meaning of this nightly battle. They saw it as the fundamental struggle of existence, order versus chaos, light versus darkness, life versus death. These were not abstract concepts to them. These were real forces that battled every single night in the hidden places of the universe. Every Egyptian, from the pharaoh to the lowliest farmer, participated in this battle. They did so through ritual and prayer. They did so through maintaining justice and order in their daily lives. When a person lived according to Maat, when they told truth and acted justly, they strengthened order. They helped Ra in his battle. They weakened Apep's power. Conversely, when people lied or acted unjustly, they strengthened chaos. They fed Apep. They made the serpent more powerful. Every act of disorder in the human world empowered the forces of chaos in the divine realm. This connection between human behavior and cosmic order was fundamental to Egyptian belief. It meant everyone had responsibility. Everyone had a role to play in maintaining creation. The priests taught that eclipses were moments when Apep nearly succeeded. When the sun darkened during the day, it meant the chaos serpent had temporarily swallowed Ra. The people would panic. They would rush to temples. They would make offerings. They would chant spells loudly. They would make noise to frighten Apep. And when the sun emerged from the eclipse, they believed their actions had helped. They had assisted in forcing Apep to release Ra. Modern people might see eclipses as natural astronomical events, but the ancient Egyptian understanding carried its own truth. They recognized that existence is fragile. They understood that order must be actively maintained. They knew that the forces of chaos are always present, always threatening. The eclipse was a visible reminder of the invisible battle that happened every night. The story of Ra and Apep also explained other natural phenomena. Storms were seen as manifestations of chaos breaking through. Thunder was Apep's roar echoing into the world of the living. Lightning was the flash of divine weapons striking the serpent. When crops failed or the Nile floods were irregular, people believed chaos was gaining ground. When these things returned to normal, it meant order had been restored. This mythology gave the Egyptians a framework for understanding their world. It explained why bad things happened. It provided a way to feel they could influence events. It connected the cosmic and the personal. When someone died, their soul would join the blessed dead watching Ra's journey. When someone was born, it was new life emerging from the victory over chaos. Every aspect of existence was tied to the eternal battle. The story also explained the nature of time itself. Time was cyclical, not linear. Each day was a repetition of the first day. Each night replayed the original battle. The universe was not progressing towards some final conclusion. Instead, it was maintained through constant repetition of the fundamental struggle. Dawn came after night, life emerged from death, order rose from chaos. And then the cycle began again. This cyclical view of time gave Egyptians a sense of stability. No matter how dark the night became, dawn would come. No matter how chaotic things seemed, order would be restored. The pattern had held since creation. The pattern would hold forever. This certainty allowed them to face difficulties with confidence. This faith sustained them through troubles. The pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Horus, had special responsibility in this cosmic drama. The king was expected to maintain Maat on earth. By ruling justly and performing the proper rituals, the pharaoh helped Ra defeat Apep. A good pharaoh strengthened order. A bad pharaoh empowered chaos. This is why the Egyptians took kingship so seriously. The pharaoh's role was not just political, it was cosmically necessary. Warriors who died in battle were said to join Set on Ra's boat. They would help defend the sun god for eternity. This made military service noble and eternal. Death in combat was not the end. It was a transition to a different kind of service. The warrior's spirit would continue fighting, but now in the divine realm against the ultimate enemy. Magicians studied the spells used by Ra's crew. They learned the words of power that drove back Apep. They memorized the secret names that bound chaos. These magicians saw themselves as extensions of the divine battle. When they used magic to heal or protect, they were wielding the same forces that Ra used against the serpent. Magic was not separate from religion, it was the practical application of cosmic principles. The Book of Overthrowing Apep was one of the most important magical texts. It contained detailed descriptions of the chaos serpent. It provided spells to bind and weaken Apep. It gave instructions for rituals to help Ra. Priests would recite from this book during the night. They would perform symbolic acts of destruction against wax or clay serpents. These actions in the temple were believed to affect the real battle happening in the Duat. The connection between the divine battle and human life ran deeper than ritual and prayer. The Egyptians believed that every person's soul participated in the cosmic struggle. When a person lived according to Maat, their soul added light to the universe. When a person embraced chaos through evil actions, their soul fed darkness. This made morality not just a social concern, but a cosmic necessity. Children were taught about Ra and Apep from their earliest years. Mothers would soothe crying babies by telling them Ra was fighting for them. Fathers would explain to their sons that being brave was like being set on the Solar Barque. Daughters learned that maintaining harmony in the home was like Maat maintaining order in the universe. The mythology shaped every aspect of character development. Schools taught the stories as both history and moral instruction. Young scribes learned to write by copying texts about Ra's journey. They memorized the names of the hours of night. They drew pictures of the Solar Barque and its crew. Education and religion were inseparable. Learning to read meant learning about the gods. Learning to count meant calculating the movements of Ra across the sky. Artisans incorporated the mythology into their work. Painters decorated tomb walls with scenes from the Book of Gates. They showed Ra's boat sailing through the underworld. They depicted Set fighting Apep. These images were not mere decoration, they were magical aids for the deceased. The dead person's soul could use these painted scenes as guides during their own journey through the Duat. Jewelers crafted amulets shaped like scarab beetles. These represented Khepri, Ra's morning form. Wearing such an amulet was believed to bring the power of renewal. It connected the wearer to Ra's daily rebirth. When someone wore a scarab amulet, they carried a piece of the sun god's victory over chaos. They were protected by the same force that defeated Apep each night. Architects oriented temples toward the east. The first rays of sunrise would strike the innermost sanctuaries. This allowed Ra's light to penetrate to the heart of the temple at dawn. It was a celebration of the sun god's victory. It was a welcoming of the triumphant deity back to the world of the living. The temple became a threshold between the divine and mortal realms. Farmers organized their year around the solar cycle. Planting happened when Ra was ascending toward his summer strength. Harvesting occurred as Ra began his descent toward winter. The agricultural calendar was really a religious calendar. Every season was defined by Ra's position and power. Working the land was participating in the cosmic order that Ra defended. Even the weekly market days were connected to the mythology. Certain days were considered more favorable because Ra's journey, those nights faced fewer dangers. Other days were considered unlucky because Apep was believed to be stronger then. People planned important activities around this divine schedule. Marriages, business deals, and journeys were all timed according to Ra's cosmic battle. The Nile flood, most important event in the Egyptian year, was explained through the mythology. The flood came because Ra's victory over Apep was particularly strong that season. The chaos serpent was so thoroughly defeated that the waters of Nun could flow into the world as blessing rather than threat. The flood was chaos transformed into life-giving order. It was the perfect symbol of Ra's purpose. When the flood was good, bringing just the right amount of water, people believed Ra had completely triumphed. When the flood was too small or too large, they believed Apep had interfered somehow. Disaster was never random, it was always connected to the cosmic struggle. This gave people a way to understand tragedy. It provided meaning even in suffering. Death itself was understood through this mythology. When a person died, their soul began its own journey through the Duat. Like Ra, they had to pass through dangers and challenges. Like Ra, they would be tested by demons and guardians. Like Ra, they could be reborn into a new existence. Death was not the end. It was a journey similar to the sun's nightly voyage. The deceased was even called the Osiris, followed by their name. This identified them with Osiris, who had died and been reborn as Lord of the Underworld. But the deceased also travelled with Ra. They joined the blessed dead who watched the Solar Barque pass through the underworld. They became part of the eternal audience witnessing the nightly battle. Some souls even earned the privilege of joining Ra's crew. They would help defend the sun god. They would take up weapons against Apep. Death transformed the person from someone who supported Ra through prayer into someone who supported Ra through direct action. This is why proper burial was so important. The deceased needed their body preserved. They needed the correct spells inscribed in their tomb. They needed supplies for the journey. All of this helped them reach Ra's boat successfully. Without proper preparation, a soul might be lost in the Duat. It might become prey for demons. It might never find Ra's light. Burial practices were not just tradition, they were necessary preparations for a real journey. The process of mummification mimicked what Isis did for Osiris. It also prepared the body to withstand the Duat's harsh environment. The wrapped body represented the chrysalis of transformation. Just as the scarab beetle Kepri emerged from its larval form, the deceased would emerge from death into new life. The physical preservation enabled spiritual transformation. Grave goods placed in tombs included model boats. These were not just symbolic. The Egyptians believed these models would become real in the afterlife. The deceased would need a boat to join Ra's vessel. They would need a vessel to navigate the underworld waters. Everything placed in a tomb had practical purpose in the next world. The living helped the dead join the cosmic battle. The cult of the dead was really an extension of the Apep mythology. When families brought offerings to tombs, they were sustaining their ancestors' ability to fight for order. A well-maintained tomb meant a strong soul helping Ra. A neglected tomb meant a weakened soul unable to assist. The living and the dead were partners in maintaining creation. Festivals throughout the year celebrated aspects of the solar journey. The New Year festival celebrated Ra's rebirth. The beautiful festival of the valley honored the connection between living and dead. These were not separate religious observances. They were all parts of the comprehensive understanding of existence as a battle between order and chaos, light and darkness, life and death. Music and dance at these festivals were not entertainment. They were ritual actions that aided Ra. Drums beat to strengthen the sun god's heart. Rattles drove away evil spirits that might help Apep. Dancing represented the movement of cosmic forces. Songs told the story of Ra's victories and inspired him to continue fighting. Every aspect of celebration had sacred purpose. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, Ra is beginning another journey. The sun has set somewhere on Earth. Darkness is spreading. In the hidden realm of the Duat, the Solar Barque is sailing through shadows. Set stands watch at the prow. The other gods prepare their weapons, and somewhere in the depths, Apep is stirring. The chaos serpent is preparing to attack once more. This is not ancient mythology disconnected from our modern world. This is the eternal truth expressed in mythological language. The battle between Ra and Apep represents something real and ongoing. It represents the struggle that exists in every moment. Order versus chaos. Light versus darkness. Meaning versus meaninglessness. This battle happens not just in some distant underworld. It happens in human hearts. It happens in societies. It happens wherever consciousness exists. Every person faces their own Apep. Everyone encounters chaos in their lives. Illness is chaos attacking the body's order. Depression is chaos attacking the mind's order. Injustice is chaos attacking society's order. Lies are chaos attacking truth's order. The forms change, but the fundamental struggle remains the same. Something in us must fight back. Something in us must defend order and meaning against the forces that would destroy them. Ra represents the part of us that refuses to surrender, the part that faces darkness each night but emerges each morning, the part that experiences death, whether literal or metaphorical, but finds rebirth. Ra is the human spirit's determination to continue. Ra is the will to create meaning despite knowing that chaos constantly threatens. Ra is the light we carry through our own personal underworlds. Set, the god of chaos who defends Ra, shows us something profound. Sometimes chaos must fight chaos. Sometimes the wild and untamed parts of ourselves are exactly what we need to face the destructive forces. Set was violent and unpredictable. But his very wildness made him effective against Apep. This teaches that every aspect of ourselves has purpose. Even the parts we consider dark or dangerous can serve the greater good when properly directed. Maat, who maintains order through her simple presence, shows us another truth. Order is not maintained only through fighting. Order exists through commitment to truth and justice. When we speak honestly, we strengthen Maat. When we act justly, we empower order. When we maintain balance, we help Ra in his battle. Our everyday ethical choices have cosmic significance. They are not trivial. They matter in the great struggle. The daily death and rebirth of Ra teaches us about transformation. The sun god must become old and weak. He must die completely. He must pass through the darkest hour. Only then can he be reborn. This is true for us as well. Growth requires letting go of old forms. Change demands we pass through difficult transitions. Rebirth is impossible without first experiencing death. The darkness we fear is actually necessary for renewal. The fact that the battle never ends is not depressing, it is liberating. The ancient Egyptians understood something modern people often forget. There is no final victory. There is no point when we can stop fighting for order and meaning. Chaos will always return. Darkness will always fall. But this means our efforts are always needed. Our struggle always matters. Every dawn is a new victory. Every act of order is a triumph. Nothing we do to maintain meaning is wasted. The eternal nature of the battle also means failure is never final. Apep attacks every night. Sometimes the serpent wounds Ra severely. Sometimes the battle is nearly lost. But the sun always rises again. Order always recovers. This should give us hope when we face setbacks. When chaos seems to be winning in our lives, we can remember that this too shall pass. The struggle will continue. Morning will come. We can rise again no matter how dark the night becomes. The crew of Ra's boat teaches us that we do not face our battles alone. Ra needed Set's strength. He needed Maat's order. He needed Sia's perception and Hu's authority and Heka's magic. Different gods contributed different qualities. We too need help. We need community. We need others with different strengths than our own. No one can sail through their underworld alone. We all need a crew. The blessed dead watching Ra's journey represent continuity. Those who came before us faced the same struggles. They fought the same battle between order and chaos. They emerged victorious enough times to pass on life and civilization. We are connected to this great chain. We fight not just for ourselves, but for those who will come after. Our victories allow future generations to have their chance. Our maintenance of order gives them a foundation to build upon. The Egyptians believed their rituals helped Ra. They believed their prayers strengthened the sun god. Modern rationalism might dismiss this as superstition, but there is truth in it. When we commit to order, when we choose meaning, when we act with purpose, we do strengthen something real. We strengthen the patterns of order in the world. We make it easier for others to choose the same. We create culture and civilization. We build meaning together. The Book of Gates and the Book of Caverns, with their detailed descriptions of the underworld hours, show us that darkness can be mapped. Terror can be understood. The Egyptians did not pretend chaos was not terrifying. They acknowledged its power, but they studied it. They named the demons. They charted the dangerous passages. This is wisdom. Face your fears directly. Understand them. Map your own underworld. Knowledge reduces terror. The gates that Ra had to pass, with their riddles and challenges, teach us that transformation requires tests. We cannot simply skip to rebirth. We must prove ourselves worthy. We must answer the riddles of our existence. We must give the passwords that show we understand truth. Growth is earned through facing and overcoming challenges. There are no shortcuts through the Duat. The lakes of fire and regions of torment in the underworld remind us that the journey has real dangers. The stakes are high. If we surrender to chaos, if we abandon order, there are consequences. Not because some god punishes us, but because chaos is inherently destructive. Lies destroy relationships. Injustice destroys societies. Disorder destroys meaning. The punishment is built into the act itself. But the fields of reeds where the blessed dead dwell promise that maintaining order has rewards. When we live according to truth and justice, we create something good. We find peace. We achieve harmony. Paradise is not a place we go to after death. Paradise is what we create through living rightly. It is the natural consequence of choosing order over chaos. The story of Ra and Apep gives us a framework for understanding all of existence. It tells us that creation is a struggle. Order must be maintained. Darkness will always return, but so will light. We have a role to play. Our choices matter. Our actions have cosmic significance. We are all crew members on the Solar Barque. We all help defend meaning against meaninglessness. We all participate in the eternal battle. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember that you are not just resting. You are joining the ancient pattern. You are experiencing a small death that will lead to rebirth in the morning. You are traveling through your own underworld. And somewhere in the realm of myth and meaning that underlies all reality, Ra is fighting for you. The sun god is defending the possibility of tomorrow. He battle is raging. And when you wake to see the sunrise, know that it represents a hard-won victory. Know that order has triumphed once more. Know that the eternal struggle continues and you are part of it. Sleep well, knowing that dawn will come. The sun will rise, the battle continues, and as long as we choose to fight for meaning, order will prevail over chaos. The light will overcome the darkness. Ra will defeat Apep, not just once, but every single day, forever.